Good. Good morning, BlizzCon. Beginning now, the Diablo 3 Crafting Sanctuary panel. Give a warm BlizzCon welcome to our Diablo 3 development team.
Oh, perfect. What's up with this? Oh, someone left a drink here.
Hello, BlizzCon. How you all doing? Hey, our clicker works. So awesome. Hooray for the clicker! All right, so my name's Jay Wilson. I'm the game director on Diablo 3, and we have a bunch of cool stuff to show you today. Before we start, I'm going to introduce all the lovely people with me. As I mentioned my name already. To my left is Kevin Martins. He's our lead content designer. Josh Tallman, concept artist. Pete Cooper, senior environment artist. Pete. Jason Bender, senior system designer. Jill Harrington, senior technical artist. Steve Shimizu, lead gameplay programmer. Christian Leichner, our art director. And Michael Nicholson, senior user interface artist. Woo! Let's hear it for UI. So, war is coming to the world of Sanctuary, and it's a war unlike Sanctuary has ever seen. 20 years ago in the Diablo universe, the three, Baal, Mephisto, Diablo, they were taken down by humanity. Yeah, and thank you for that, by the way. We appreciate it. So, hell shuddered in fear. They've spent the last 20 years preparing for their revenge. So today what we're going to talk to you about is how we build a world under siege by all of the forces of hell. We're going to start with story and go into environment, and we're also going to show you a little bit about the tools of the trade that you're going to use to fight that coming war. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Okay, everyone. So Diablo 3 is an action game with a very blistering pace. It's very fast-paced, and everything comes at you. You know, you're killing monsters and killing loot. You're clicking on everything that moves and utterly destroying it. So there's some unique challenges in that in storytelling. So I want to show you guys a little bit about how we do action storytelling. So we have a philosophy at Blizzard that we say, play, don't tell. And whenever possible, we want players to experience the events of the story, to personally partake in the twist instead of just seeing it in a cinematic or a dialogue, etc. No matter how spectacular, you feeling it yourself is better. So we haven't always done a great job at this, and I want to show you guys an example from Diablo 2 that could have been better.
Greetings, stranger. I'm not surprised to see your kind here. Many adventurers have traveled this way since the recent troubles began.
He goes on.
No doubt you've heard about the tragedy that befell the town of Tristram. Some say that Diablo, the Lord of Terror, walks the world again. I don't know if I believe that, but a dark wanderer did travel this route a few weeks ago. He was headed east to the mountain pass guarded by the rogue monastery. Maybe it's nothing, but evil seems to have traded.
Wariv's a good man, but he just won't shut up. And you know, in Diablo, you really want to click on everything that moves until it blows up in bloody chunks and treasure. So, yay, treasure! So in Diablo 3, I want to show you guys an example that we have in the demo, so you can go and see this for yourself. And this is action storytelling. So in this case, you're going to get a little quest from this man. He's a weaponsmith who's been betrayed by somebody working with the evil cults. And he will tell you what he needs from you as he joins behind you. So he'll be talking and you can keep moving. Then the video is going to fade to the end of the plot where you have the showdown with the villain and an occultist leader who is ultimately behind it all. And all of that happens while you keep playing as well. So all of the talking is kept very short, and there's no dialogues that are anywhere near 1 minute and 4 seconds long, for example. No matter how slowly Wariv talks, we're going to have him talk only just a tiny bit. And here we go.
I will make an example of Dargon, that traitorous cur. Help me hunt him, and I will sell to you instead of those zealots.
Master, help me. The crazed weapon maker wants my head.
What makes you think I care for your life? Kill them, my pets.
Now that Dargon is dead, no one shall question my reputation or my resolve. Now to my goods. You'll find none better.
All right. So the other thing we want to talk to you about is opt-in storytelling. In Diablo 3, we actually have a lot more story depth. There's more lore, there's more conversations, there's more information, there's more things to read and listen to. But all of it, not all of it, the vast majority of it is opt-in. It's the player can experience it when he wants to. A great example of this is lore books. Lore books are objects that fall as treasure, and when you click on them, they automatically start playing an audio file where the narrator, the person who wrote the book that you found, is reading it out loud. So they have a little bit of voice acting, they're interesting, and it takes no more time than simply clicking on it to pick it up, and you're already experiencing the story, and you can keep running along killing monsters while you listen to it. So let's see one in action.
I am convinced that some malevolent being is attempting to wrest control of my thoughts away from me. I hear voices directing me to horrendous acts. And there are times when I seem unable to control my body. Lazarus knows. I am certain of this.
So this example that you're hearing is actually King Leoric. King Leoric was a king in the region of Tristram, and he went insane when Diablo tried to take over his mind. He successfully fought it off, but just being associated with Diablo drove him mad. And you actually hear him writing about his experiences as he slowly becomes the Skeleton King. So we're not just giving depth to existing characters, we're also filling out some of the stuff from the previous game. So a lot of interesting things there. So once you have a good story and you found some good storytelling techniques, your next challenge is to find a good scenario, a good level, and a way that ultimately a story can become something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. So a perfect story for a Diablo game is a siege. Basically, everyone understands it instantly. It requires very little explanation. Whether you're an attacker or a defender, everyone knows how a siege works. More than that, it's easy to design awesome action for. So Diablo gameplay is killing monsters, collecting loot, making new loot, etc. If you have the walls of a keep that's being besieged by demons, and in a few seconds we're going to show you Bastion's Keep and an army of demons, the biggest army of demons that has ever besieged the world of Sanctuary, you're the only person that stands between them and total annihilation. When you're just going and wiping out monsters on the wall, it feels way cooler and way more important than just some random area that you're going into. You're literally stopping a demon army, so that same gameplay becomes that much better. So in that case, that's a good example of the action implying story. We don't have to tell you what the stakes are, we just have to tell you there's a giant army, set you loose, and you fill in the rest yourself. So we're going to show you the walls of Bastion's Keep and how we built them and so on in just a minute, and we're also going to show you the inside of the keep. At a certain part in this story, demon sappers break into the bottom of the keep and start pouring up through. So the defenders are unprepared for this, and you have to run down and clear out the dungeon. So that same classic RPG and classic Diablo gameplay of wiping out a dungeon feels super awesome when you know you're saving all of humanity to do it. All right, so let's pass this over to Art and show you guys how we build these.
All right, so when design and story come up with an idea like that for gameplay, it's then concept team's job to take over and to give that idea visual form. So when we were told that there was going to be a siege portion of the game, one of the first images that popped up in our heads was the image of a battleship. Now, on a battleship, there are a lot of shapes that really reinforce the idea that it's supposed to be this impenetrable fortress. So we decided to work those ideas into our early sketches and see how they turned out. If you look at some of those, for example, maybe you see that giant iron spike-like thing hanging off a chain kind of reminds you of an anchor, or the walkways of the fortress are already kind of long and elongated. They kind of resemble a ship anyway. So instead of having archers, maybe we should have giant ballistas on rotating platforms. It kind of reminds you of the guns on a gunship. And Maybe instead of round towers or your typical square towers, we could have the towers be triangles to remind you of the bow of a battleship. And that triangular shape is something that all of us actually really liked because of its iconic properties, and we decided to use it as the main visual theme for the entire area. So we decided to put variations of the triangle all over the columns, the doorways, the walkways, the towers, and it really gave it this unified feel that made it look like it was designed by one architect, which was a good thing. So after that, it was time to define the materials. And for the materials, we chose just simple stone and iron. They're simple materials, but they're also very easy to read from our game cam, and they're easy to understand as far as like what it's made out of and that it's very strong and sturdy. So that was the first pass. After the first pass, what we have to do is show it to the team. We take their feedback and incorporate whatever they want to see into the concepts and try to do away with anything else that isn't really working. So one piece of feedback that we heard often was that while the first pass looked good, it was designed well, it felt a little too ornate and frail, so we addressed mainly the iron portions. We made the iron darker, we made it chunkier, the shapes got simpler but a little more aggressive. They're just big pieces of crude iron bolted onto this fortress for structural and protective support. The stone and the iron, the stone got lighter, the iron got darker, so there was a better contrast between the materials. Even the stone itself got a little chunkier and had a little hints of those triangular shapes in it. So, after that, we have to get our images ready for the modeler. And as a concept department, we really try to concentrate on putting as much information into one image as possible, or into a single image as possible. So, if you look at this, the tone is decided, the mood's there, the color's there, the materials are there. But if you divide this image up, you have a lot of smaller components that the modelers can take and build out a lot of small modular parts out of. And this way, if they want to come up with a wide variety of layouts, it's very easy to do. And if we have to go back and change things, it's also very easy to move things around. So that was the outside, and now what's left is the inside. For the inside, we wanted to change the mood over from this aggressive, hostile battlefield feeling to a more warm, a little more lived in, a slightly more inviting feeling, because the battle's going on the outside, but the soldiers are either escaping the battle or preparing for the battle on the inside. So we decided to do away with a lot of those triangular shapes and maybe replace it with more squarish shapes. They're both angular shapes, but a square is a lot less aggressive than a triangle. We also got rid of a lot of the iron and replaced it with wood, because the color of wood is already warm enough, and as a material, it's just not as threatening as any kind of iron. And to reinforce the idea that the inside is where the soldiers are, we wanted to populate it with a lot of props or devices that they'd be using, like catapults you see up there, ballistas, or mills or forges, things that they'll be using to prepare for the battle on the outside. So when you put all that together, you get something like this, where you have the same kind of stone as the outside, you don't have as much iron, there's a lot more wood, there's devices that they use for the battle, and you definitely have a mood that has changed from a hostile battlefield to this uneasy, nervous, kind of calm before the storm kind of vibe to get you ready for what's happening on the outside. And to show you how we take a concept like this and build a level out of it, Pete's going to take over and show you how that's done.
Thanks, Josh. Great job. So when we get a concept like this from our amazing concept department, we sit down on the environment team and have a meeting and figure out how we're going to turn this into in-game assets. This particular concept is actually really fantastic because from this one shot we get a lot of mood and depth, and we get all the materials we need. So it's incredibly useful. So in this, we figure out how we're going to break it up into components, walls and floors and pillars and etc. So once we have that, we start building. So here's a quick video showing a gray box version. So we build walls, pillars, bridges. We figure out the gameplay space. In this portion of building, there's a lot of back and forth between us and design to figure out the gameplay space, make sure it doesn't feel too confined, doesn't feel too open, has a nice feel, nice flow to it. Then we start dropping in the materials. So we know we wanted a lot of stones and woods, want it to feel a little warmer than the actual exterior. And in this part, it's a little bit challenging because we have to make sure it feels like a unique level from the outside, but it still needs to feel like it's in the same world, in the same place. And then we get the awesome tech art team to help us out with the interactives, the lighting, the particle effects, of course the breakables, because everyone likes breaking stuff. Lots of stuff to blow up. So, yeah, that's pretty much my job, and this is awesome. This is what I get to do every day. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. So, I'm going to pass it off to Bender and Jill.
So now that we have a place to fight and a place to explore, there has to be stuff in it to discover. So I'm Jason Bender, game designer, and Jill and I are going to tell you a little bit about what we put in this world. So obviously, Diablo is about killing monsters, first and foremost. Some of you would argue, though, loot's pretty important. That's what we're all in it for anyway. So as you're going through these areas that you saw, like the inside of Bastion's Keep, you're not just killing monsters as you go. Every now and then you're stopping to kick open a barrel, seeing if a skeleton pops out, or clicking on a treasure chest to get some good loot. So when we populate the loot, we understand that you divide your time between these two things. So we have to put them fairly evenly throughout the world, so there's always something interesting to see, something new to find. One of the things, as you can see here, there are a number of chests in the world that we populate. There are common things like barrels to really rare golden chests, which might have a rare drop or a legendary item inside. We populate the world with thousands of potential places for these to be. Every one of them is hand-placed. We want to make sure that they're all in rational positions. We want to put corpses in places like battlefields and areas where there's been some kind of conflict. But we want to put treasure chests in libraries and other cool places where people would store stuff. So in this example, you can see just one area that's just completely littered with potential treasure chests. But anytime you go through this zone, only a few of them will actually populate with treasure. You never know what you're going to find, though, so you just got to keep your eyes open. So another way we can mix it up is with mini dungeons. So Pete just showed you that we take a lot of time making sure every dungeon looks really cool, but we make quite a few of them because Bastion's Keep is a big place. It's a big snowy fortress. But when you're going through the wilderness, you want to change a pace. You want to see something different. You might go from outside a kind of dark and dank wood, and then you might go inside to see some creepy cave. We can use these caves to introduce monsters. This is where these monsters come from. It's where they live. Also, they're really great for bite-sized goals. So, when you go into a small cave that you're going to find, it's not going to take too long. You're going to have a really rewarding exploration experience. And at the end of it, you're going to get a rare or a treasure, a rare treasure chest or a monster that you can fight. And that's really satisfying. It's a great opportunity for us to introduce story elements. Each one of these things is really interesting and unique. One of them might be where the Moon Clan store all their equipment. One of them might be a spider's den. And there's always opportunity for us to be telling more story. So on top of that, it doesn't all have to be a dungeon. Sometimes you might run into other kinds of events. You could just be walking through the swamp and boom, 500 zombies pop out. Suddenly you gotta, kind of get your wits about you and start using your skills. And this is a great thing for us to bring the world to life by using monsters in an interesting way and unique hazards that you may not have seen before. It really makes the world more colorful. So when you're, as they say, hoovering an area, you're going from end to end, looking for every treasure chest, trying to kill every monster. We can really make that interesting and variable and really add some random elements to the world. Also, it's a great opportunity for us to introduce more story elements where you might run into not just necessarily zombies popping up out of the ground, but you might see an NPC whose wagon is overturned, who needs help, and then you have to help them on their quest, and it gives you sort of a side thing to think about, and it just keeps things different. So Jill's going to tell you a little bit about other things we can put in the world to keep it interesting.
Hi, I'm Jill. I'm a technical artist on Diablo. So one of the other details that we put a lot of attention to is objects that you can interact with, usually by smashing them. You may be wondering why we think it's so important to put these objects around, because they're just decoration, but it's really more than that. First of all, it is a lot of fun to break things, and you could clear a whole room of all the monsters and then go back around and kill all the furniture if you want. It also makes your character feel really powerful because you're ground stomping so hard that the walls are crumbling. It also makes the world feel a bit more real because you're really part of it. Your actions have a difference on the things that you're fighting near. As if you summoned your magical arcane orbs near a pile of barrels, it would be really unrealistic if the barrels didn't fall down. And we also, as Kevin was saying, we take even these opportunities to put a bit of story into the world. Not every story is a long epic. These are more little stories that you can make up for yourselves, like why was this poor guy left on the torture rack, or why is this barrel filled with blood?
So yeah, we've seen some treasure chests, we've seen some stuff to break. That's all well and good, but you know, what do we get to kill, right? All these skills and runes you've put together, this is so that you can do some battle. So what lives in this world? That's something that we ask ourselves when we're placing monsters. When we place monsters in any given area, there are a combination of things that might appear together in a random assortment as far as how they're laid out in the world, but not random in what appears together. So we like to look at an area and say, okay, what lives in this particular dungeon that makes it different from the last one? Also, it's important for game pacing. If the entire area is just littered with fallen and nothing else, and no treasure chests, that's going to be kind of boring. You're just hitting the same power. But we've taken special care to make sure the runes and the skills really give you a lot of variability in your gameplay, and the monsters are what you're going to use these against. That's what it's all about. So we try to mix it up so that you have interesting mechanics, and so that you can use, in this example, I mean, you can see that there were a lot of little guys running around. You could use crowd control on, or big area effect. There was a big guy who you might need to burn down with some really pointed damage. You can use your mobility to jump around the room. So we try to make sure that when we put monsters together, they live as a family. There's the big guy, there's the caster, there's the ranged guy, and there's the little guys that swarm you. And we like to make sure that there's always a variety of things so that you're always on your toes. Also, if you happen to see this guy when you're playing out there on the show floor, beat the candy out of him. He's always got good loot, but he's hard to catch.
So monsters. Monsters are not usually born because we can't really figure out which ones are male and female. So the way we make them is each monster gets a team of people from every area of development. There's art, design, programming, animation, and tech art, which is me. And design will usually come to us with an idea of the role they want the monster to fill. There's swarmers, there's casters, debuffers. And in this case, the monster that we're looking at is still under construction. And he doesn't have a real name yet, but internally we've been calling him the Brick House, because that's kind of what he is. He's big, he's strong, he's smashy. And we wanted a guy that was a little bit different from your average humanoid. So the concept team came up with this interesting design. And from there we take it to the modeling team. And this was a rough model that the team first made. And we took it for a spin in the game. And in this case, we found he had a few problems. Mainly he was too wide to fit in the corridors of the dungeons. So we go back to the drawing board, and the art team takes this opportunity to try lots of different ideas. We wanted to make him a little narrower so he would work, but we wanted to keep the sort of interesting, unique silhouette that he had. We liked the final body shape that was made, but we were not sure what to do with his arms. So we have a lot of debates. Every detail we have arguments about. We've talked about his toenails for hours. And these are some of the many ideas that we tried for his arms. Anything you can think of, we probably tried. But in the end, we decided that we liked the idea of the huge forearms, because they could be used to protect himself against attacks. So this was the finished model, and from there it went on to rigging and animation, and it got some personality. And after that we get to test it in the game. So we threw on some skills and some effects and made sure that it reacted well to various skills, and it was fun to fight, that it wasn't boring at all to fight with, and possibly most importantly, we wanted it to be fun to kill, which is coming up now. Come on, there he goes. Because to us, one of the most important stages in any monster's life is really death. We want to create epic death experiences for you guys. So every monster, we put a lot of attention into making sure that it dies in a different way, something that's suited to how it acts in the world. We want to have a lot of visual variety. We want it to be really satisfying every time you smash a monster, and maybe sometimes we want to gross you out just a little bit.
All right, so now that Jill has picked on a bunch of defenseless monsters, I'm going to go over a little bit about what gameplay programmers do to give the monsters a fighting chance. So we're going to talk about monster behaviors, monster AI. So here's an example of a really early a monster that we had in the game called the Gravedigger. As you can see from the concept art, he's like a humanoid guy. He makes his living digging up graves, probably attack you with that shovel. Surly guy. So we looked at him, he's a human, so start out with an idle state, an unalert state, what he does when the player's not around. So maybe he's digging a little bit, wandering, digging a little bit. And the player gets close to him. He goes into a suspicious state, like I've heard something, like he kind of wanders around a little bit in a suspicious mode. Then when you get close enough, then he goes into an aggressive state, starts attacking you. So this is what this looks like. If you look to the right of the video, he's coming up here. So there he is. He's digging. Pretend this is a graveyard. He hasn't seen the player yet. Okay, gets close. Oh, he's heard something. He's kind of looking around. He's suspicious. Player gets closer. Now he sees him and he goes and attacks him. Well, as you can probably imagine, I mean, this is what actually happens when players encounter the Gravedigger. So what did we learn? What did the Gravedigger teach us? First is that in our game, normal enemies have very short lifespans. And that's on purpose. That's by design. We really want the player to feel awesome. We want the player to feel really powerful. So we want you to be able to mow through normal enemies and not really have, be spending a lot of time fighting them. And secondly, non-combat behaviors really aren't seen. Our game is an action game. Players engage our enemies really, really quickly. As soon as the enemy's on the screen, players are clicking on them. There's fireballs descending on them, magic missiles, all kinds of things. It's really not a kind of game where people want to try and sneak around monsters. So taking this, we have to pick and choose our opportunities where we can showcase the AI, give the monsters a little flavor. So we can do that in three places mainly. First is when they spawn, like during their spawning animation. So you'll see that's when they come onto the screen. So you'll see in our demo, we have some guys climbing up the walls, skeletons are bursting out of barrels, that kind of thing. Second is what Jill showed you, which is their deaths. So during deaths, we have a big opportunity to sort of show you a lot more about the character of the monster too. So spiders will shrivel up and shake, and skeletons will burst into an explosion of bones, that kind of thing. And the third is during the combat itself. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the details of our combat. So what's the goal of a combat AI? Is it to kill the monster efficiently? It seems kind of obvious, but turns out it isn't for us. Really, our goal is to make the player feel awesome. And it seems kind of weird, so let me show you an example of this. So here we've got our new class, Demon Hunter. She's got a crossbow. And you can see she's fighting 3 fallen grunts. And since she's got a ranged weapon, she keeps trying to create space for herself. Take a step back, fire, take a step back, fire. But these enemies are super efficient in how they're trying to attack the player. Anytime they see a gap, they're closing the gap and immediately swinging with their clubs. So you can see that her little microing, her little attempt to try and get away from the monsters really isn't working at all. This doesn't really feel awesome for the player. In fact, it feels pretty frustrating. So what can we do? Just by adding a few simple things, we can really affect the situation here. So adding the concept of forced delays. So the first thing is we add a closing delay, and it's really, really subtle. So when the monster wants to close on the player, when it wants to close that gap, we actually hold them back just for a little bit of time. It's almost imperceptible. You can't really see it. Also an attack warm-up. So even after the monster gets up to the player and wants to swing his club, we prevent him from doing that for a very small period of time. And we also add a run-stop movement. So even when the monster is running directly at the player, we force him to stop occasionally. So as you can see, this player is actually able to really create some space, kind of micro these guys a little bit more, and really we reward the player for moving. We reward the player for playing an action game. So layering on top of that a little bit, some other stuff that we can do. We can add a taunt, so you look at some of the guys in the back are kind of slamming their clubs or raising their shields. Gives a little bit of an opportunity for us to give them character. Also, we introduced the concept of running near the player as opposed to directly at them. So sort of give you the sense of threat as opposed to like a direct threat all the time. And then also we can add things that are like classic Fallen behaviors, like fleeing when your allies get killed. So let's put this all together in a more realistic game situation. Here's the Demon Hunter again, except we've given her Entangling Shot, we've given her Multi-Shot, and put also a ton of Fallen on the other side. And you can see the player's able to create some space. The player's able to really control the situation. I mean, she feels awesome. This feels awesome for the player. This is really what we want out of the Diablo combat experience.
Hi, my name is Christian Leitner. I'm the art director, and I'm going to walk you guys through tools of instruction. So customization is a huge part in Diablo 3. We're really trying to push that a lot and give the player a lot of choices so you guys have a lot of interesting things you guys can do to your characters. And this obviously starts, first of all, with our armor sets. And what you're seeing here is one of the little bit more advanced armor sets for the Barbarian. In the background, you can actually see the concept that started this armor set. And that was done by our very own Josh Tallman here on our panel. And what we're trying to do when we design these armor sets initially is that we're really trying to come up with a lot of variety. We're trying to make sure that it is very distinct for the class. This is an armor set obviously for the Barbarian. It's a little bit more ornate than maybe you would expect from a Barbarian, but it still feels very much like it would be a Barbarian. He's got cut off elephant heads on his shoulders, if you notice that. And at this stage, really, a lot of the things we really pay a lot of attention to is that while we want to give you guys a lot of choices, we also want to make sure that it still feels very much like the class. Here's another armor set that we have for the Witch Doctor. And again, you can see the scary mask concept that was initially done for this in the background. And in the foreground, you actually see the 3D model that's in-game. Again, very specific to the Witch Doctor, feels like the Witch Doctor, and it's just something that really gives you that flavor for that class. Again, it's very important that we keep that flavor going. Another thing that's very, very important on these character sets is silhouette. We want to make sure that from the game cam, it reads really, really well. In this case, you can see the big headdress, these spider legs sort of sticking out of the helmet. It's very iconic of the Witch Doctor, but it also reads really, really well. You want to be able to see who's wearing what armor set when you're playing with your friends, co-op online, and really have fun with that. Another example would be this. Again, this is a Barb armor set. You can see the shoulder pads are really strong. They define the silhouette really, really strongly. And again, you probably won't miss him when he's running past you in a dungeon. Another thing is to, every once in a while, we try to push the envelope a little bit. The Witch Doctor is a good opportunity for that. We look around and we sort of get ideas for what we could do with a class that would maybe push an interest level or the particular thing that really epitomizes this class a little bit more. In this case, we had this crazy idea from our concept team that what if the armor moved? What if it had these sort of like these tentacles on the shoulders and on the headrest that would actually be moving? So what you see is a concept on the bottom there, or on the left, excuse me, and the 3D model on the right. And we actually built it. It's one of our favorite sets. And in motion, actually ended up looking like this. Yeah. So you can see it's really creepy looking, and again, it's going to look really great from game cam as you're playing this stuff. Of course, what's all this epic armor without epic icons?
Nothing.
And
nothing.
Yes. Mike does our icons. So what you can see here is the icons actually match, obviously, the 3D model. So as you put your icons on the paper doll, it will show up on the 3D model to the left. What's nice about this, too, is that the different looks for the armor sets actually match across the classes. What I mean by this is the exact same armor set on the wizard as it is on the barb. And on the barb, you can see the icons matching the barb set, and on the wizard, it matches the wizard set. So it's very nice because there's no disconnection between putting the armor on the character and what it actually ends up looking like on the character. That's another improvement we did over Diablo 2, and we sort of pushed the envelope a little bit further on Diablo 3. Another thing is that we're giving the players to do is customization, and we really feel like this is something that we're very proud of. Yeah. We want to give you guys as many choices as possible. In this particular case, you see the female wizard. On every armor set, you're going to have a slot that you can dye to a color that you prefer. The dyes you can pick up in the world, either craft or buy, or maybe loot drops. Now, the interesting thing about this, too, is that some dyes are more rare than others. So in this case, you probably could get like maybe a crimson red that is very hard to get, and dye your armor set that way, and it'll really sort of let you show off the thing you got going there. And that's also nice to play in co-op, or even if you're doing PvP. Last but not least, weapons progressions. And here you have a concept on the top. We're showing the one-handed axe, going from very, very simple to a little bit more ornate and fantastical. And usually what we're really considering about this is on the bottom you see the 3D models that match those concepts. What's important to us at this stage is that all the way on the most simple axe, that it reads as a very simple axe. There's not a lot going on. And then as you progress further and further, it feels like you're really upgrading this axe. You're really getting more power and more bang for your buck. In between the choices, we're not so worried about progression necessarily. Mainly what we're worried about at that stage is to make sure that it feels interesting and varied, so that as you're leveling up throughout the game, you have a choice to sort of try out different things and see if they're fun and if they feel right, and even to see if they match your armor set maybe, or things like that. The other thing about these axes or the weapons in Diablo 3 is that we make sure they're themed, and we sort of have a penchant for trying to make sure that maybe they look a little bit more evil or maybe a little bit more nice, and really want to give you guys a lot of bang for your buck when it comes to that. And we do this for all the armor. Like I said, this is just the one-handed axe as an example. And that pretty much puts us to crafting with Jay. Thanks.
All right, so the sad truth for us designers is that when you work with a system that is completely random, like the Diablo loot system, sometimes it fails. So the question is, what does that mean? And for us, how does that make our lives difficult? Well, randomness is completely unpredictable. If you go through an entire dungeon and you do not get a single weapon drop, the loot system didn't fail. There's not something wrong with our random number generator. That's the system doing what it's supposed to do. Sometimes you don't get what you want. So the thing that we need as designers is something that we can rely on for the case where loot does fail. So for the original Diablo and Diablo 2, that was vendors. If you didn't get a good weapon or a good pair of boots, you could always go to a vendor and see what they had, and they would have something that is good enough, better than what you've gotten in the world, that can kind of fill in the gaps. We don't care if the player gets like really awesome loot, like, you know, if they get a streak and, you know, jackpot, that's great. But if they don't get good loot at all, that actually can make the game overly difficult and not fun, especially early on. So the purpose of our crafting system is really artisans are vendors 2.0. We looked at them and felt like we could do a lot more with them, that we could have a lot more robust system than just filling in the gaps. So I'm going to introduce you to all of our artisans. This is the Mystic. So the Mystic crafts wands, staves, and other kinds of magic items. She can also enchant items, and she can identify items. So, and then our next one is the Blacksmith, which we've kind of shown before. He crafts armors and weaponry. adds gem sockets. So basically, if you have an item that doesn't have the ability to put gems in it, he can actually add sockets to it so that you can. And repairs items. And now that you've seen kind of two of them, also it's good to point out that when we created these characters, we were really focused on making real people. You know, they're not. We tried to not make them generic. They're very distinct. They have strong personalities, and they have a lot of opinions about the world they're in, how they view, you know, Sanctuary, how they view you and your actions. So it's just one more example how, even in small ways, everything we touch, we try to permeate the game with story. So, and this is a great example. The jeweler, a greedy old man, he crafts rings and amulets, combines gems together, and can desocket gems. Basically, he can take an item that has gems in it, and for a small fee, he can pull the gems out of it. So, and that preserves the gems and the items. So you can always feel free to socket your gems in your items and use them. Was one of the things we love, the idea of kind of combining gems together and collecting them. That was really prominent with Diablo 2 gameplay, but we didn't like that it made you not want to use your gems. So we want you to use your gems, but we also want you to collect them and upgrade them. That's also why the jeweler can combine gems and make higher quality ones. So exactly how many gems? A lot. So there's 14 gem levels. This shows basically every gem that can drop in the game, but only the first 5 levels actually ever drop. So up to Radiant, every level past that can only be made by the jeweler. And he does that by combining those smaller gems together. So getting those extremely high-level gems is definitely achievement. Good luck.
Okay, now that Jay introduced you all to the artisans, we're going to talk a little bit about how we interact with them with the interface. Now, as an interface designer, as much as I would love to believe you guys are going to pick up Diablo 3 to gaze lovingly at the interface, I know that is not the case. You guys are there to kill stuff and to enjoy the action. And so the interface should never impede that. It should be quick to pick up, simple to use, so you guys can get about your business of killing things. So with the vendors, the main way we could achieve some simplicity was to maintain consistency. We have here the blacksmith interface, and you can see that it's broken up into 2 main areas. Down the left-hand side are the options, and this will be the same for all the vendors. Anywhere there is a consistent option that they can do, such as shopping or crafting, will always be in the same spot. We really didn't want you to have to learn a new interface just because the vendor offered up different options. On the right-hand side is the chosen option. So in this case, it's socketing for the blacksmith. Also on the right-hand side, you can see that we've added some flavor to the UI just to kind of reinforce what it is that that vendor does for you. In this case, the blacksmith, so we have tools of the trade. We have tongs, have a hammer, and the surface looks a bit like an anvil. And if you were to compare that then to the Mystic, you can see that the options stay the same down the left-hand side, but the right-hand side, the flavor changes. It's just any way we can help infuse some personality, even in the interface, just to kind of remind you who these people are. Now, crafting is something that we're going into in a different angle this time with Diablo 3, and we're pretty excited about it. It's a new system, and with that comes a host of problems. And I'm going to kind of go through the process a little bit just to show you how we make the interface. So the first stage is an early mock-up. What you see here never made it in-game for any kind of testing, but it helps to sit down with design and go over stuff and make sure that it's hitting all the information points that they want to get across to the player. So you can see there's the listing, there's a picture of the item, next to it are all the material requirements, the crafting button shows you the time, the cost, and at the very bottom we wanted to have a queue so you could do multiple items at once. After we kicked it around a little bit and design looked it over, we realized that the item listing was just too detailed. I mean, sure, it had everything that you needed, but it was just too much. And because of that, you could only show 4 items at a time. And we really found out that through playtesting, people don't like scrolling and they don't like paging, if at all possible. So here, taking all the notes we had, we go back and take it for a second test. And this is the first one that made it into game for the team to test out. You can see we took off the requirements, the material requirements per item, so now we're able to get 10 items per page as opposed to 4. It's a good thing, less paging. The queue is still down at the bottom, and we thought it would be awesome to have this big tooltip in the middle that gave you all the information you wanted, and that's great and all. It does what we wanted, but from playtesting, it just came back, the feedback was it was just too cumbersome. As Jay Wilson would love to say, this interface looks like a systems developer came up with it. It's just too much information all at once. Also, the bottom ended up being confusing. Initially, we had wanted to have varied lengths of time for how long an item would take to be crafted. Sometimes, I think at one point we kicked around like days. And again, on paper, that sounds awesome. Wow, this item's so awesome, it takes forever to make. Not so much when you're playing the game. So we go back to our first goal. Got to make it simple. So what we did was, as much as we liked having the imagery per item, so you kind of knew what you were going to make, it caused too much space. So we simplified it into just a list of items. The queue is now just a progress bar behind that listing, and the bottom detail has all the requirements that you need. And any other information is on mouse over on the item listing, so that it's also consistent with the way we convey information across the rest of the game. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Pete. So now that you know how to interact with them, you can see where you go to find them.
All right. So we knew early on we wanted to have a caravan that for the artisans to follow the player around through their quest. We knew we wanted them to be very different and have unique feels, unique shapes. So we came up with a caravan design theory for the visual design for the actual wagons themselves. We started with the blacksmith. We went with some blocky, aggressive shapes, thick woods, heavy metals to help accentuate the blacksmithery of the blacksmith. The mystic, we went with a lot of round organic shapes, some vibrant cloth, a lot of nature themes, so it felt completely different from the blacksmith. Then with the jeweler, some triangular shapes, some thin, warm woods to contrast with the blacksmith thick, beefy stuff, and some intricate, detailed bling. All right, so we knew we wanted to have these guys actually level up and progress, and we thought it would be way better to actually have their environment level up instead of just their wardrobe. So on the left side there, we have how you get the blacksmith. When you first get him in the game, he's very simple, low level, and as you level him up through the game, he gets better, and his cart obviously gets more exaggerated, more over the top. The themes get more and more prominent. The metals get stronger, the woods get thicker, and he gets more and more epic gear. So here is the Mystic, same thing. On the left side, this is a low level. We had a little bit of a tough time designing her early on because we knew we wanted her themes to be nature themes and vibrant cloths and round wood. But early on, her stuff looked very similar to the blacksmith because we wanted the wagon to feel really simple and really low level to begin with. So we decided to actually make the layout round, and I think that helped a lot to diversify them. And then here's the jeweler. The jeweler had a completely different problem because when you're thinking about a low level versus a high level, with the blacksmith, you can have very simple rusty daggers and tiny little buckler shields, and later levels you can just get crazy with giant flaming two-handed maces and just really epic stuff. It's very clear to see. And the same with the Mystic, huge wands and stabs and lots of great big magic stuff. But the jeweler has these little tiny itty-bitty jewels and trinkets and all that stuff. And we can't make them too big, even in the late levels, so we actually ended up making the wagon itself much more opulent. And as it levels up, it gets a lot of like gold plating and a lot of just intricate details all over the actual wagon itself. Ready for the last, Jay?
Yep. Yeah, I'm ready. All right, everyone gets to level up in Diablo, even the vendors. So we posted this on the web a little while ago, but we like it so much, we're to show it again.
Boom.
All right. So later, we've only got a little bit of time for questions, but at 3 o'clock today on the main stage, we'll be doing a full hour of Q&A. So if you don't hear the question that you're hoping for, if you don't get to ask the one you want to, definitely come to that Q&A and we'll get it answered for you.
How are we doing on time?
There we go.
Last BlizzCon, I asked you about gem wards by putting gems into armor with multiple sockets and getting a new effect, like moon wards and 10.0. And just wondering, at Gamescom, you said that you liked the idea and you'd write it down. I was just wondering, how is that progressing? Like, did you like that idea when you talked about it with your team?
Yeah, we've talked about it a little bit, but no, we haven't really progressed that much with it because right now we're focused pretty much on finishing out the artisans as they are. But it's still, it's still one of those things that we, whenever we hear a good idea we like, we have this big list of good ideas and we kind of stick them in there. So it's still there, but no, we haven't been able to spend much time on it yet.
Thank you. Hey guys, my name's Jeff from Montreal. So I'm a big World of Warcraft player. I love the customizability of the UI. I was wondering how much of the UI is customizable within Diablo 3?
I'm sorry to disappoint you, sir. There will be no customizing of the UI in Diablo 3.
There's a very good reason for that, though. Jay, you want to handle that?
I'm sorry?
There's a very good reason for that.
Yeah, I mean, UI and customization mods in general are awesome. Like, we love it, but the problem that World of Warcraft had was their game got shifted by the whole mod community. And really for them, that was fine. That was their expectation. That's what they wanted. But for us, what we don't want is for Diablo to be shifted from the straightforward, simple, easy-to-play game that it is to a much more complex game, because that's what UI mods do. They add complexity. And at a certain point, they become a requirement. So we never wanted that for Diablo.
Hi guys, first thanks for creating this awesome game. We're really looking forward to it. My question's kind of a half question. Single player versus multiplayer, when your friends come in and you have the vendors and they level up, let's say you have a level 2 or 3 blacksmith and my blacksmith is only level 1, will that transpose over or will my vendor still be level 1?
So our intent right now is we worked a lot on how we were going to do this, and we played with it a lot, and we had all kinds of crazy ideas, like we'd have a multi-town that everybody's vendors would show up in. What we've learned is that people generally just want to see their own vendor and access their own vendor, and if there's some benefit that like a friend has, that generally they'll just give those things to you, like, oh, here's a cool sword that my vendor has, here it is. Or, hey, give me your sword and I'll enchant it for you. So we've found that being able to just see your own vendor has been the best way to go. Now, as we continue to play the game, if we come up with a different solution or if we find people are wanting to play it differently, then we can change it pretty easily.
And then on that, the PvP, are we still going to be able to access those vendors in the PvP world versus single player? Has that been decided?
Our PvP game is completely separated from the PvE game. So it's only there's not a grand world. There's the arenas where people go and fight. And we did that intentionally because we don't want PvP game balance to ever dictate PvE game balance. It's all about co-op and monster killing for us. We never want to nerf a skill because it's too powerful in PvP. So, you know, in general, when you go into PvP, all your skills are going to do what you think they should do, but they may be tweaked a little bit so that they'll be balanced for PvP and then return to normal back into PvE.
Thank you. Hi guys, how's it going? I love Diablo. My question is basically when you play through the game on Diablo 2 and you get all your awesome gear and you look just fantastic at the first playthrough. When you go back through Nightmare, unfortunately, you have to ditch all your great gear for the piddly-looking hatchet and all the lame helms and stuff. So in Diablo 3, will you get to maintain your look, or do you have to go back to using the not-so-great-looking gear?
Oh, we got good news for you. So yeah, in Diablo 2, the gear reset. Look, in Diablo 3, it does not. The gear, there's 18 like tiers. Tiers is not, I mean, it's a term that we use. It doesn't actually mean the same thing that it does on World of Warcraft, but it's just an easy term for us. But there's basically 18 tiers. There was more like about 6 to 8 in D2, and then they just repeated them. So those go between normal, nightmare, and hell. So you just get progressively better looking throughout the game.
Letting everyone know, we have time for a few more questions. In case you don't have time to ask a question, we will have Diablo 3 open Q&A at 3 p.m. at the main stage.
Hey guys, my question's about the dyes. You said that you acquire rare dyes and everything. If I use a dye at the beginning of the game and I ditch that armor for a different armor, will that colored dye get planted onto the new armor that I used?
So no, it won't. And part of the reason for that is we want to make sure that there are always, there's always a reason to look for more. Like if you found one black dye and then never needed it again, that would kind of make it not that interesting next time it dropped. But it's not just that you don't just dye one part of your armor. It's important to note that you can dye your pants different from your jacket, different, you can dye a lot of different pieces of armor. So you will need to, if you acquire a new armor, you'll need to dye that again. But we haven't determined like quite the rarity where the sweet spot is. We need to make sure that black dye is really cool and you look different, or red dye when you have that on there. But we don't want to make it punishing. I should also add that there are sort of, in some cases there are diet versions of the cool color, like there's a really awesome red and there's like a pretty good red, and the pretty good red is not that hard to come by, so you can kind of say like, hey, it's a nice red jacket you got there, buddy. It's not as cool as mine, but it's pretty cool. So that's how it works.
Thank you.
Hi, so my question is, you've said repeatedly that one of your goals for Diablo 3 is to design so your character feels more awesome, more powerful. And I was wondering, in Diablo 1, it was the opposite. Your character felt very frail and always threatened when you're going through the dungeon. So why did you make that decision? Is there going to be anything in Diablo 3 that will make you feel like that? And what would you say to players who want that?
Oh, we're going to kick the crap out of you. Don't worry about that. And I know when we show the builds, like we're showing very early parts of the game and it's normal difficulty, and everybody remembers Diablo 2, the normal difficulty was pretty easy. We're really trying to hit a sweet space between the original Diablo and Diablo 2. It was great that Diablo 2 was very approachable early on, and that's the game that we want. But the original Diablo, yeah, was terrifying, and that was great too. So as you progress through the difficulties, the game's going to become increasingly harder, and a lot of the things that we're putting into the game, like the changes to the health mechanics and the addition of the hotbar, a lot of these are so we can actually make monsters more threatening to you. In Diablo 2, if you could just potion spam and town portal away from every threat, you actually never felt that threatened. So that's why we're trying to fix all those issues in Diablo 3, so that when you go into hell difficulty, you're terrified. So definitely, you don't need to worry about that.
Thank you.
Just letting everyone know, we have time for one more question.
Regarding, say, a Diablo 3 Collector's Edition, what would be an exclusive in it? Like a slight different look to an armor set, or what?
We haven't talked about the Collector's Edition yet, so I'm not sure what would be in it. Something cool, I'm sure. But yeah, we haven't talked about it at all, actually.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is all. that we have today. Please give a round of applause for our Diablo 3 development team.
Thanks.
Join us next on the main stage for WoW Class question and answers, and on the panel stage, StarCraft 2 Art Team.